And so we're going to start off by looking at a case study. And the case study that I want to focus on is British actress and writer Michaela Coel. And this month she revealed that her show, she has a show right now on HBO called I May Destroy You. But if you've never known her, she's an award-winning writer, producer, actress. She did her own show, Chewing Gum, which I loved. And even though she had that history of having an award-winning show, when she was negotiating with Netflix originally for that show, they offered her $1 million for the show. And she said to them, well, that's good, but what I really want is 5% ownership of the series. I want to retain 5% ownership of the series. And she said that when she asked for that, there was just silence on the phone. And the executive said, it's not how we do things around here. Nobody does that. And then he said to her, it's not a big deal to not have it, just take the money. And she said, well, if it's not a big deal, then I would really like to have my 5% rights, to retain 5% rights on that. And they then negotiated down to her where they were saying, okay, we will not give you 5%. We will give you 0.5%. Can you imagine? She's writing the show. She's conceptualizing the show. They're like, we'll give you $1 million, but the show is us. And when she said, I just want 5%, not 10%, 20%, they negotiated her down to 0.5%. And then that fell through. And they didn't even give that to her. And while she was doing this, she then stated that her persistence was noted by a Netflix employee who then whispered to her, and she said, Michaela, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. You're doing the right thing. And then she said, I remember thinking, I've been going down rabbit holes in my head, like people thinking I'm paranoid, I'm acting sketchy, I'm killing off all my agents, because she had to fire her agent. She worked with one of the most powerful agents in the world, and she had to fire them because they were forcing her. They were saying, you should take this deal. Later, of course, she found out that it profited them for her to take that deal. It didn't profit her, given what she wanted, but it profited them. And so in the process, she had to fire her agents because they were focusing on that. And she said, when she sent those words to her, she finally realized, I'm not crazy. This is crazy. And so that's what we go through as women. When we're asking for what we clearly deserve, we're often made to feel as if we're being difficult, or we're asking for something that's completely outrageous when, you're asking for something that is normal. And it's important that you have, whether it's like a coach, I have clients who call and say, I'm asking for this, I want this, do you think it's outrageous? And I say, absolutely not. You've done the work, you've shown the value, then what you're asking for is good. And the same thing here with Michaela, someone has to say to her, what you're asking for is not crazy, for her to feel validated. And so what eventually ended up happening was that she took the deal to the BBC and HBO, and the show is now on HBO, and they gave her full creative control. They gave her the rights to her work, and she has an executive producer title. So in walking away from that Netflix deal where they were just saying to her, take the $1 million and give up your rights, she said no, had to fire her agent and go through a difficult period to finally get what she wants. And so this is a case study that I'm going to talk about and say, what do we learn from this? What are we learning from Michaela as she went through that difficult negotiation? And the first thing that you learn from it, and we say for women, is that you've got to be fearless and you've got to be willing to negotiate. Because if you aren't, you're not going to be rewarded. If she has stayed with Netflix, who were saying, take the $1 million, and I'm sure there are lots of people who will say, $1 million, you're going to give up $1 million for 5% of your show. She wouldn't have gotten what she did, which is the money and full control and executive producer. So what it says is you've got to be fearless and be willing to negotiate. And in order to do that, you have to know your worth. Ladies, we have got to know our worth. And how do you know your worth? Well, the first thing is that you have to know what you want and why you want it. So for Michaela, she knew what she wanted was not only money, but she wanted to have some percentage ownership. And this is something that we can waffle on. I have coaching clients where I say, what do you want? And they find it difficult to say that. You've got to spend the time figuring out what value do you bring and what do you want for it. Do you want a raise in pay? Do you want new projects? Do you want the ability to work from home 2 days a week? Do you want more benefits? You've got to sit down and really think about what do you want and why. Why is it important to you? And that's so important. You know, my newsletter this week, I sent out this week, was 5 ways to communicate your value. And oftentimes you want the promotion, you want the pay increase, you want it because you have demonstrated value and you want to be rewarded for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So even though people may act like, hey, you're being crazy. No, it's not. You're not crazy. And one of the things that in negotiation is you have to know your why. You have to know what value you bring, what you deserve, so you can ask for it. And then another thing that comes out from this case study is that you have to know your BATNA. And when I say BATNA in negotiating terms, that's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's the lowest price, the lowest outcome that you will tolerate. And so for Michaela, her BATNA was, I need ownership, some form of ownership. If I am not going to get some form of ownership of this show that I am creating, then it's not worth it for me. And so you have to know, what do you want? Really sit down and say what's important to me. And you get what's important to me. You're able to prioritize when you say why. So for example, you may want a promotion over the money because that promotion makes your resume looks good, so that it puts you in contention for CEO positions. The money will come later. Or you may determine, I don't really need the position because what I do, how I demonstrate my value will stand out regardless of my title. Pay me my money. You know, why is it important to you? What do you want? And what's your BATNA? Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What's your lowest alternative? And that determines whether you to accept the negotiated agreement or walk away. And so in the case of Michaela, she walked away because they weren't going to give her. The money is good, but at hers, where she is in her career, the $1 million is not very attractive ownership. And as we say, she took the risk of saying no so she can get everything she wanted from HBO and BBC. And that's because she knew her worth. And you have to as well. You've got to know your worth. And these are the steps to knowing your worth. Be aware of what you want. Why? The newsletter I sent out this week talked about the 5 ways to communicate your value. And one of them is you have to stay ready knowing your value. You have to always know what your value is. If you're in the elevator with your boss's boss and they say, what's going on? You don't want to stutter. You want to be able to say, okay, we've been working on this and here are the outcomes that I've been able to do for the organization. You don't want to list off a whole bunch of tasks. You want to stay ready knowing your value so that any moment an opportunity presents itself, you can give it, you can demonstrate your value. And so it gives you confidence of knowing your worth. So I think the thing is, you don't accept, if it's a project for me, I know my worth. I know what value I bring, what outcomes I give. So when I'm given a fee for a service, I think of future Sonia. I think of, okay, if I take this fee at a reduced rate in the middle of the project, when I'm overwhelmed, when it's really work, am I going to feel resentful that I am not being paid enough? And we all have been there where we're taking on a project, we don't feel we're being paid enough, and then in the middle of it, all the hard work, you're just miserable and bitter because you're thinking, I don't get paid enough for this. And so one of the things I do when I'm negotiating is I think of future Sonia. So think of your future self. How would she feel when you're negotiating? And that helps you keep to track. So don't undersell yourself, know your worth, and be confident in it. In that case study with Michaela, it was only when someone else told her, you're not crazy, you need to stand up for yourself, that she felt validated. And we look a lot for validation, which is why we need our friends, which is why we need coaches to validate us. I always say that everyone seeks validation. The issue is, where do you seek it? Do you seek it from everyone, or do you have a nice little board of directors that you can seek it from? I have a board of directors. I have a coach. I have a best friends. I look to them for validation. You should too. And I always say to people, I'm willing to be on your board of directors as your coach, so you can get true validation and I can give you the hard truths. The second thing I want you to figure out about knowing your worth is, don't be hurt when people ask you to demonstrate your value. Don't be hurt. Don't be hurt when people seek to get you at the least possible price. I mean, if we're going to buy a coffee machine and we search 3 stores and they're selling it at $1,000, and then we walk into a store and they're selling the very same exact machine for $5.99, we don't say to the person, hey, do you understand that machine is really worth $1,000? I'm not going to pay you that $599. I'm going to give you the $1,000. We don't do that. We snap it up at $5.99 and think, oh my goodness, we lucked out. And that's what companies do. They look to see, how can I get you at your value at the least possible price? It's your responsibility to say, hey, no, I know my price. I know my value. And here's what I need, and here's what I deserve. And so knowing your worth is the first step to negotiating better as a woman, and being confident in that, knowing your why.